It is said that God is present wherever a Satsanga takes place. This Satsanga is a weekly discussion of the divine ocean of knowledge given by Shri Datta Swami to this world. Held in Shri Swami's presence, this Satsanga is made up of 3 parts. In the first part, Jnana Saraswati, we discuss Swami's discourses and the numerous answers given by him. In the second part, Mahima Yamuna, we will talk about the miracles performed by Shri Swami. And in the third part, Bhakti Ganga, we will get to listen to the devotional songs or bhajans composed by Shri Swami.
Shri Datta Ganapatim Bhaje, 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 Unmatta Natana Tandavam, Matte Bhavadana Bhasuram, Chittabja Bodha Bhaskaram, Ayatta Yoga Rajitam, Viddesha Nitya Pujitam, Uttana Pani Mudritam, Shri Krittivasa Sasutam, Kailasa Drisha Dinartanam, Bhaktantaranga Vartanam, Papauga Pashakartanam, Shri Parvati Sutam Bhaje, Shri Datta Ganapatim Bhaje, Shri Datta Ganapatim Bhaje, Shri Datta Ganapatim Bhaje, Shri Datta Ganapatim Bhaje. Lambodharanga Tandavam, Mudrakarabja Panditam, Sarvanganaga Mandanam, Vande Vinayakam Patim, Dhim Dhim Mitakitamartalam, Bam Bam Ninada Shankakam, Ananda Nitya Tatparam, Dhyayami Pramathanayakam, Amodakara Modakam, Vedantamati Madakam, Dushkarma Phalasadakam, Vigneshwaram Gurum Bhaje, Shri Datta Ganapatim Bhaje, Shri Datta Ganapatim Bhaje, Shri Datta Ganapatim Bhaje, Shri Datta Ganapatim Bhaje. Srishti Sthiti Laya Karanam, Mokshakhya Daitya Maranam, Samsara Jaladhi Taranam, Staumi Prabhu Naravaranam, Panchasya Madi Daivatam, Devarishibhi Samarchitam, Aloka Galita Sanchitam, Vignadhinath Mashraye, Shri Datta Ganapatim Bhaje, Shri Datta Ganapatim Bhaje, Shri Datta Ganapatim Bhaje, Shri Datta Ganapatim Bhaje. Lokaika Parama Vaibhavam, Lokeshwaradi Sambhavam, Aloka Parihatodbhavam, Alokaye Param Bhavam. Shri Krishna Kavi Niveditaihi, Shlokakhya Modakairimaihi, Ananda Ganapatim Patim, Aradhayantu Sadhakaah. Shri Datta Ganapatim Bhaje, 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 Shri Datta Ganapatim Bhaje.
Parabrahma Samadham, Shri Dattatreya Madhyamam, Shri Datta Swami Paryanta, Vande Guru Parampara.
सर्वविस्मञ्जस्तपादपद्मायते वामहस्तालोलवेदशास्त्रायते ज्ञानसूर्यायते दत्तरूपायते श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनं श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनं श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम्.
In this section, Dr. Nikhil will read out the discourses given by Shri Datta Swami along with Shri Swami's answers to questions posed by devotees from different parts of the world.
So with salutations at the lotus feet of Shri Datta Swami, let us begin with the satsang for today. Today, what we planned is the continuation of the readout of the Mahasatsang, which took place on the 10th of July. A group of devotees, including Miss Lakshmi Trailokya, had visited Swamiji, and Swamiji had given 27 points in that discussion. Swamiji had summarized that 9-hour-long satsang attended by a number of devotees. And 27 points came in that summary. So the other day, last week, we managed to cover only 9 of them, which is exactly 1/3. So now let us continue from there on. Just briefly to help you recall those points, I will just point you to the titles of each of those points. The first point was related to what Satsanga is. The second point was related to true devotion, which is the actual purpose of spiritual knowledge. The third point was related to the adjective unimaginable placed before God, the fact that God is unimaginable, and it is better to say unimaginable rather than omnipotent. Of course, God is omnipotent, but the adjective that Swamiji prefers is unimaginable, and here he has explained that very beautifully, which we discussed last time. The fourth point was related to God's omniscience and omnipresence. The omniscience of God, of course, is true. The omnipresence of God is only true in an effective sense and not in a literal sense. The next point was related to the word unimaginable, which can refer to either the substratum or the quality. And Swamiji described the opinions of the school of Shakti, the Shakteyas, and the Vedantis. The sixth point was related to Datta the given. So the fact that the unimaginable God enters into creation and merges into the first energetic being, and that first energetic being is Datta. Thereafter, he merges into other divine forms, the various energetic incarnations, and he also merges into some human forms to make different human incarnations. The seventh point was related to the aim of creation, where the lack of entertainment is said to be the purpose of creation. But Swamiji has said that merely for getting rid of boredom, the fact that it is not enough, or it is perhaps very cheap for God to just simply create creation and watch it. The real reason is enjoying the love of the true love of a climax devotee. That is really the purpose of creation. The eighth point is that although love or devotion is the highest, it is not greater than God. It is falsely thought. Some people say that there is no God, but love itself is God. Now, that is not exactly true, and a beautiful example Swamiji gave is from the Ramayanam, where a monkey said that the devotion to Rama is greater than Rama, but he quickly understood the mistake. The stone on which Lord Rama's name was written just simply sank to the bottom. The ninth point is about the unimaginable God becoming the visible incarnation, and various quotations from the Veda were also studied in that context. The fact that the incarnation comes in front of you, he performs miracles. The miracles give explain to you the existence of God. Then the unimaginable seems to become the imaginable. In what sense? That also we understood. We also looked at the example of the actor Devadatta acting in the role of King Harishchandra in a drama. The same example was again discussed last night in the new Satsang on the Guru Purnima message. So that was a brief recap of the first 9 points. Now let us move to the 10th point, which is, give me just a sec. Yeah. So now let us move to the 10th point, and that 10th point discusses the soul's opportunity to become God. Now let us begin reading. Every soul cannot become God, but every soul has the opportunity to become God. This is because any soul becoming God purely depends upon the will of God. Becoming God by becoming an incarnation is said to be the descending of God to become a soul. It is called avatar. Ava refers to going down. So the God becoming an incarnation is said to be an avatara. It is not the ascending of the soul to become God. It is not uttara. Ut refers to up. Ava refers to down. So it is avatara. It means God comes down. The soul does not go up. The soul cannot ascend to the status of God. God descends to the status of the imaginable human being. We looked at in a previous point, we looked at Satya Tyacha Bhavata. It is God who became the Tyat. God who became the imaginable. The God who is unimaginable, he became the imaginable. The imaginable human being or the imaginable soul within creation never became the unimaginable God. So God becomes an incarnation to carry out certain work for the welfare of the spiritual world. This is the main purpose of God's incarnation. There are other associated purposes for God's incarnation, such as pleasing close devotees by granting them the 4 fortunes of vision, touch, conversation, and close living. They are known as darshana, sparshana, sambhashana, and sahavasa. They are called the bhagya chatushtayam. Bhagya means fortunes, chatushtayam means the 4, the group of 4. The soul's aspiration to become God is actually a permanent disqualification for becoming God. It means that the soul should always aspire only to become a servant. And if God wishes, entirely left to his wish, the soul cannot force that. If God wishes, he may enter into the soul. In yesterday's Guru Purnima message, Swamiji was also referring to, even if God wants to make you part of God, that also is dependent on his will and not our will. All we can aspire for is becoming a servant of God, nothing more. Moving to the next point, the 11th point. This is related to using deception to uplift the atheist. Shankara had no way but to say that every soul is God because he was completely surrounded by atheists. An atheist will never accept any God other than himself. So using a 3-step logic, Shankara turned atheists into theists. He said, you are God and you exist, so God exists. First step is you are God. Second step is you exist. And the third step is therefore God exists. When the newly converted atheists asked for the miraculous powers of God, Shankara advised them to worship God to get the purity of mind. He said that they would practically experience their identity as God only when they got rid of the impurity, which was the practical effect of the long-standing ignorance. That impurity or that practical effect of that long-standing ignorance is ajnana vikshepa, which we saw yesterday also. In worshipping God, he recommended devotion and service with sacrifice. Devotion was further emphasized by Ramanuja, while service and sacrifice service with sacrifice was emphasized by Madhva. The Shankara was the divine preacher who had the courage to slightly twist a true concept in the interest of the welfare of souls. With that twist, he was able to bring about spiritual reformation of the souls. A mere scholar only states the plain truth. A mere scholar is not interested in uplifting the devotee, whereas the true Sadguru, his main interest is not revealing the truth. His main interest is reforming the soul, uplifting the soul. So whatever is necessary for that, he will do. Even if he has to twist the truth a little bit, he will do that. Swamiji has explained this previously, where he said that later on he will correct that error which had been introduced. So he keeps track of what he has told which person, and gradually, as the person progresses from a lower level to a higher level, he will rectify that concept. Moving further, an ignorant person was suffering with a headache, imagining that a chameleon had entered his head through his ear. Every doctor, like a mere scholar, told him the plain truth that it was impossible for a chameleon to enter his head through his ear. Hence, the person's headache could never be cured. But there was one wise doctor. He was like a true preacher. He was like the Satguru. He accepted the false notion of the patient that the chameleon was in his head. He assured the patient that he would get the chameleon out of his head. Then, hiding an actual chameleon in his hand. What is a chameleon? A chameleon is a lizard. Okay, a lizard that changes colors. Hiding an actual chameleon in his hand, the wise doctor approached the patient and holding the patient's ear, threw the chameleon out of the window. The patient saw the chameleon being thrown out and believed that the chameleon had come out of his head. And it had been removed by the doctor through his ear. And his headache was instantly cured. So this shows how sometimes the Sadguru has to accept the false notion, the false ideas, the false impressions that devotees have, rather than directly contradicting them and saying that, no, that is completely false. If you say that, then there is a disconnect between the Guru and the Shishya, between the teacher and the disciple. So the Sadguru, because he is interested in uplifting us, sometimes he may accept the false notions that we have. Sometimes he may introduce some certain twists in the real concept, so that ultimately we'll accept the teaching better. Later on, he will, as we progress in our understanding, in our maturity, he will rectify those concepts. Okay. The next point is, this is the 12th point. This is related to universal spirituality and universal religion. The unimaginable God exists in every divine form of every religion and in every divine form of every sub-religion of the Hindu religion. Within the Hindu religion, there are many sub-religions. Like previously, Swamiji was talking about the followers of Shakti, the Shaktayas, followers of Vedanta, there are followers of Yoga, there are followers of different deities, like the followers of Lord Vishnu, the followers of Lord Shiva. So each of these are like sub-religions. So within Hinduism, there are these sub-religions, and actually they are very similar to the picture of the entire world, where in the world you have many different religions. So Hinduism is basically a miniature model of the entire world. Just as in Hinduism, there are many sub-religions, so also in the world as a whole, there are multiple religions. So what applies to the different sub-religions of Hinduism also applies to the rest of the world and all the religions within it. So here Swamiji gives an example that sugar candy is one and the same, but it can be molded into many candy statues that differ from each other only in external form. Similarly, every divine form of every religion is the same absolute unimaginable God. Each divine form is an incarnation in which the unimaginable God has perfectly merged with that particular medium. The merging between God and the medium is perfect, so that the unimaginable God becomes the imaginable medium while still retaining his original unimaginable nature. Even after merging with the medium, he does not interfere with the properties of the medium, the gunas of the medium. He does not interfere with them. So even the incarnation appears to undergo all the changes that an ordinary human being appears to also goes through. For example, the birth growing up, getting older, mature, then getting old, getting diseases, and then dying. So all those various stages, as well as the qualities of the mind, all those things are unaffected. So if that particular medium, what is the medium? It is the body and soul of the devotee into whom God has entered. So that particular soul either has a sattvic nature or a tamasic nature or a rajasic nature. So even those qualities, those mental qualities are also not interfered. God doesn't interfere with them. So at the physical level, the changes that occur in the body, God doesn't interfere with that. At the mental level, the mental qualities, that also God doesn't interfere with them. However, the unimaginable God is present, and whatever are the qualities of that particular individual, that devotee, those become extraordinary, they become wonderful. That is due to the presence of God in them. So anyway, that point Swamiji will later explain. Let me not get ahead of myself. So even after merging with the medium, God does not interfere with the properties of the medium. The scripture of every religion in the world was written by the same single unimaginable God. The written content, which is the syllabus, is also one and the same. What varies from one religion to another is only the external culture and the language. The goals and paths described by all the scriptures are one and the same because the goal and the author is one and the same God. Certain defects appeared in the scriptures over time due to insertions made by some ignorant followers. But just because just because of these defects, no religion should be rejected and none should convert to another religion. If you filter out all these impurities, all religions become just one religion called universal religion, which is based on the common spiritual concepts called universal spirituality. So some people might be a little confused between what is universal spirituality and what is universal religion. So what Swamiji has explained is universal spirituality means the universal spiritual knowledge, the theoretical part. The theoretical part, which is the universal, the common spiritual knowledge that is present in all religions, that is universal spirituality. And the practical effort, the worship done by the devotee, that is also universal. So that practical aspect of what you should do in terms of worshipping God, there is the theoretical worship as well as the practical worship. All that is encompassed by universal religion. So there is universality, meaning commonality, at the level of the knowledge, the spiritual concepts, as well as at the level of worship, which includes theoretical worship as well as practical worship. So that worship part is the religion part. The theory part or the knowledge part is spirituality, universal spirituality. So it is universal spirituality and universal religion, the knowledge part and the worship part. So there, basically in all religions, you will find commonality on these two aspects. Then religions, so these are the common parts. Then what is different? Religions differ only externally in terms of their different cultures and languages. All devotees can therefore remain in their own religions while simultaneously being members of the universal religion. This is just like a citizen belonging to a certain state within India is also simultaneously the citizen of the nation. He is simultaneously governed by both the state government and the central government. The next point, the 13th point, is related to God and the fundamental qualities. The unimaginable entity is beyond imagination. It is neither imaginable matter nor the imaginable energy. Both energy and matter are inert and both of them are imaginable. Space is the subtlest form of energy, and space or energy was created by God. There are two quotations which Swamiji has often repeated for us. The first one is Tattejo Srujata. Tattejo Asrujata. God created Tejas. Tejas is energy. The second one is Atmana Akashas Sambhutaha. This is also in the Veda. So these two statements are there. It means that the first one means that God created energy. The second one means that God created space. And Swamiji has explained these points several times before. So that energy or space was the first creation. And then after that, there's a matter of detail which I don't want to bring right now. The Tattejo Asarujata Swamiji has said refers to the very first creation of energy which became the medium of Lord Datta. And then Atmana Akasha Sambhutaha is the later part of creation in which Lord Datta created the inert five elements for the creation of the rest of the world. But anyway, in summary, we can say that energy was the first created item. And then later on, as the process of creation progressed, that energy got converted into matter. This is seen in the subsequent statement from the Upanishad. Akashad Vayuhu, Vayor Agnihi, Agnerapah, and so on. So Akashad Vayuhu is means air in general, but specifically it refers to the gaseous phase of matter. And once gaseous phase comes, it condenses, you have the liquid phase of matter, and then further you have the solid. So gas, liquid, and solid, basically you have matter. So from energy came matter. And from that energy and matter, from a combination of energy and matter, you get awareness. That is told in the Veda, Annat Purusha. So Anna is the food, which is the matter that you eat. And due to certain chemical reactions that occur, energy gets released. So with the combination of that matter and energy, you get awareness. Even for the production of awareness within your body, there is a combination of matter and energy. There is the brain, which is matter, the nerve cells that are there. The nerve cells are called neurons. So these nerve cells are conducting electrical impulses. And that activity, so basically you have the physical nerve cells called neurons, and within those neurons are these electrical pulses that are going. So you have energy. So you have a combination of matter and energy which produces awareness. So if you look at energy, matter, and awareness, these three are the fundamental building blocks of creation. Inert energy is called rajas, inert matter is called tamas, and awareness, which is non-inert, awareness is not inert, it is called sattvam. So sattvam, rajas, and tamas. But if you look at it from the sequence of how it is created, rajas comes first, energy, then comes tamas, which is matter, and then comes the awareness, sattvam. So rajas, tamas, and sattvam. These are called the three fundamental qualities or trigunas, and they depend on the substratum called God. Why they are called gunas? Because when you talk of a quality, the quality is usually based on a certain substratum. Last time I mentioned about what a substratum is. The substratum is the base, and base upon which something else is built. So what is that something else? It is the quality. Quality always requires some kind of a substratum. So God is the quality, and these three, God is the substratum, and these three fundamental components of creation are like qualities that are upon that substratum. So energy, matter, and awareness are like the three gunas. Rajas, tamas, and sattvam are the three gunas. Guna means quality, and they depend on God. Hence, the unimaginable God, which is God without the creation or before the creation, is God without these three gunas, without these three qualities, and hence he is called Nirguna. So it is the quality-less God, meaning God without qualities. It is called quality-less. A better word for that is attribute-less. Quality and attribute mean the same thing. So the term that is used is attribute-less. Nirguna Brahma means God without the qualities. Which qualities are we referring to? We are referring to Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva. What are they? They are the fundamental components of creation. So God without creation is called Nirguna Brahma. Now, after creating creation, when he created a form and he entered into that is the mediated God, God in a medium. What is the meaning of mediated God? It means God in a medium. That is called Saguna, because he is God with attributes. The Trigunas have been created. When creation is created, the three components of creation are there. So the Sattvam, Rajas, Tamas are already there. And when God enters a medium which is made out of those three components, he is Saguna Brahma. So there is Nirguna Brahma, which is the unimaginable God before creation. And then there is the Saguna Brahma, which is God who has entered into a medium. Mediated God means Saguna Brahma. So later on, those same three qualities, they undergo some mixing, some permutations and combinations. According to the ancient logic, there is a process called Panchikaranam. But Swamiji has basically he has said that the modern scientific description or the modern scientific explanation of how the universe evolved is a much more sophisticated explanation. Nevertheless, those three components mix together to form all the various qualities by mixing in different proportions. The various permutations and combinations of these three fundamental qualities in various proportions generate the variety of qualities found in creation. The qualities associated with the mediated God are divine qualities, and the qualities associated with souls are the various good and bad qualities. Each of these three qualities, each of the three fundamental qualities, are always found together, even though one may be more predominant as compared to the others. So you can never find any one quality, Sattvam, Rajas, or Tamas, you can never find it isolated. Like there is 100% pure Sattvam, there is no Rajas and Tamas. It can never happen. When you say it is 100% Sattvam, it means it is 99% Sattvam, but 1% you have Rajas and Tamas. So there can never be, none of the qualities can be found in pure state. So that predominant quality is simply referred to as a single pure quality in the scriptures, even though the other two qualities also exist with it in smaller quantities. Okay, going ahead to the 14th point, this is related to the good and bad sides of qualities in worldly life. Now, this is a wonderful new perspective that Swamiji has given, and we have seen this in several previous discourses where he says that no quality is good or bad by itself. So you should not stamp the entire quality as either good or bad. In worldly life or pravrutti, any quality is good from one side and bad from the other side. God created all the qualities only for their good sides. So all qualities created by God were only good qualities. God never creates anything bad. For example, anger is good when used to control a bad person, and it is bad if it is shown towards a good person. Sex is good if it is legitimate, and it is bad if it is illegitimate. Greediness is good if due to it you do not give your money to undeserving receivers. But it is bad if due to it you do not donate to deserving receivers. Having a fascination for God is good, while having a fascination for selfish worldly bonds is bad. Ego in its basic sense of the individual's self-identity is good, while the same ego in excess as pride is bad. Jealousy towards others in the form of competition to improve oneself is good, but the same jealousy that causes harm to others, uh, just a minute, but the same jealousy that causes harm to others is bad. Unfortunately, the soul turns every quality to its bad face and then stamps it as a bad quality. God and his creation are always good, and the soul alone is bad. The next point. So the 14th point, which we just saw, that is related to whether these qualities are good or bad in the context of pravrutti. And what we saw that in pravrutti, there is a good side and a bad side. God had created the qualities from anticipating their use in the good direction. We've used it in the bad direction, and that is why they can become bad. But now in the 15th point, next point, Swamiji is saying that all qualities are good when they are directed to God. This is a revolutionary concept. Let's see what Swamiji is exactly saying. In nivritti or spiritual life, the good and bad sides of every quality do not matter. Every quality is good provided it is directed to God. The good or bad side of the quality is not important. Any quality turned towards God brings the grace of God. However, any quality turned towards worldly bonds gives results depending on which phase of the quality is used. If the good phase of the quality is used, its fruit is good, which is temporary heaven. If the bad phase of the quality is used, its fruit is temporary hell. Qualities used in nivritti yield an eternal fruit because the qualities are directed to God, who is eternal. So previously, in worldly bonds, if you use the good phase, because the worldly bonds are temporary, so you will get, if you use the good phase of the quality, you will get a temporary benefit, temporary good fruit, which is temporary heaven. If you use the bad phase, again, you will get a temporary bad result, which is a temporary trip to hell, a temporary punishment in hell. In the case, when used in nivritti, these qualities yield an eternal fruit because those qualities are directed to God. The distinction between the good face and the bad face of any quality disappears when it is directed towards God with real love or devotion. When God is the goal, when God is the goal to which the quality is directed, everything changes because the greatness and sacredness of God is of an unimaginable extent. It purifies both the faces of the quality, making them good and pure. Whether it is a thorny stick or a sandalwood stick, upon burning in fire, both turn to sacred ash, which is applied on the forehead. On the other hand, even if the good face of any quality, even the good face of any quality only yields a non-eternal fruit when directed towards worldly bonds. So even if a certain quality, the good face of a certain quality is used in a worldly context, the fruit will be good, definitely, but it will only be a temporary good. It cannot be an eternal fruit because the goal of that where you're using the quality is only worldly. It is like the sweetest sugar fallen in the drain. It is not worthy of being eaten anymore. In the spiritual path, the intensity of the person's real love decides the grade of the fruit attained, irrespective of the face of the quality directed to God. Rukmini only reached the abode of God through legitimate sex. She sat only at the feet of God. On the other hand, Radha, through illegitimate sex, reached Goloka, which is higher than even the abode of God. Goloka lies above God, so that the dust of Radha's feet falls on the heads of both God and Rukmini. Hence, the two faces, legitimate or illegitimate, of the same quality of sex are seen to be immaterial in attaining the fruit when the quality is directed to God. The difference in the fruit only depends on the intensity of the devotee's true love for God. We saw that whether it is a thorny stick or whether it is a sandalwood stick, when they burn in the fire, they both equally become the sacred ash. So similarly, whether it is the good side or the bad side of the quality, if you are using it towards God, it is sacred. But then how can you say that one devotee is better than another devotee? That depends on the intensity of true love that is there in it. So which quality you are using doesn't matter, as long as it is directed to God. The next point is the 16th point. This talks about the different qualities of different incarnations. The unimaginable God or Datta present in all divine incarnations is one and the same. Hence, the root quality of unimaginable nature is one and the same in each incarnation. This means that the miraculous power possessed by all the divine incarnations is also one and the same. The media selected by God for merging are the body and souls of selected devotees who may be energetic beings or human beings. The media may differ in terms of the ratios of the three fundamental qualities. The media may differ, but the innermost unimaginable God or God Datta remains constant in them. This constant unimaginable nature is reflected through the different media in different ways as per the requirements of the divine program of each incarnation. It is just like the same light coming from an electric bulb appears to be of different colors when the bulb is wrapped in transparent sheets of different colors. For In some parts of India, for Diwali, they make a paper lantern. It's made out of paper or thermocol and whatnot. So there, what they do is they have these colored transparent sheets, which they stick, and they put an electric bulb inside that. So if the transparent sheet is yellow in color, then the light coming out will be yellow. If the transparent sheet is red or green or blue, then that particular light will come out. The actual color of the bulb inside is white. It is giving white light. But depending on the covering of the bulb, the color of the covering, you see different colors. So the color of the transparent sheets becomes more brilliant when the white light bulb inside is turned on. So as such, if you see that colored transparent sheet, it is red in color, let us say, that red sheet already has a red color. But when you put that white light bulb behind it, then the red color of that sheet becomes more brilliant. So similarly, a devotee may have a certain might be a very energetic, dynamic person. Okay, so that is the quality of rajas. If God enters into that devotee, so that person already is very dynamic, very active. Let's say the person is a very brave warrior. He already is a very brave warrior. But when God enters into him, he will become extraordinarily brave. He will be extraordinarily talented in all the martial arts and whatnot, like Parshurama. So he already had a Rajasic nature, but when God entered into him, that the medium already had that nature. That when God entered into him, he became extraordinary. Nobody could defeat him. Similarly. So same with Sattvam and same with Tamas. So this means that the qualities of the medium become unimaginable or wonderful or excellent when God merges with it. If Sattvam is predominant in the medium, excellent knowledge comes out from that incarnation. If Rajas is predominant in that medium, excellent exhibition of miraculous powers comes out from that incarnation. If Tamas is predominant in the medium, excellent qualities of fascination or deep love towards devotees comes out from the incarnation. When Datta enters a medium directly, okay, so now the Swamiji is talking about a slightly different thing, the difference between direct and indirect incarnations. This is still part of the 16th point. When Datta enters a medium directly, it is a direct incarnation of God. Datta expresses all the three qualities in a balanced manner. Sometimes an energetic incarnation merges with the human medium. God Datta already exists in the merged state in that energetic incarnation. So when the energetic incarnation further merges with that human medium, the human incarnation becomes an indirect incarnation of God Datta. Sai Baba was a direct incarnation of Datta. Krishna was an indirect incarnation of Datta because he was a direct incarnation of God Vishnu, in whom Datta was already merged. In all incarnations, the same God Datta, possessing the same power, exists. However, one incarnation may differ from the other only in terms of the extent of exhibited power. The possessed power is the same, the exhibited power may be different. All incarnations have the same possessed power because the same God Datta, and in that God Datta, the same unimaginable God is present. So the unimaginable power is equally present in all incarnations, but one may express it more, another may express it less. Yeah, the incarnation exhibits only as much of his unimaginable power as required for his divine program. Hence, we should not get confused and think that one incarnation is more powerful than the other. God has no fascination for exhibiting his entire possessed power for the sake of gaining fame like a demon. In fact, God always tries to hide himself as far as possible to avoid unduly exciting devotees. Only when devotees are in their normal, unexcited state can the incarnation easily mix with them and encourage them to clarify all their doubts freely. Just a sec. Now we come to the 17th point. This is about the paths of Nivritti and Pravritti. Nivritti, or the spiritual path, is purely the discovery of the climax devotees called sages. God is not interested in projecting his own personality so as to attract devotees to him personally. In fact, God always tries to hide himself. Only demons like projecting their own personality and power. God always tries to put hurdles in the devotee's nivritti path. Nivritti is the spiritual path. It is the effort of the individual devotee in establishing a bond of true love, true devotion towards God. So in that path, God always tries to put hurdles in the devotee's path to test the reality of the devotee's devotion. Nivritti is totally based on the devotee's attraction towards the divine personality of God. God only emphasizes pravritti, or the worldly path. He is like an industrialist who, having established a factory, is interested in the discipline and peaceful coexistence of the workers in his factory. God has made pravritti, which is following justice in worldly life, mandatory for all souls. All souls have to compulsorily follow pravritti. Protecting justice and opposing injustice is necessary for the peaceful running of creation. In pravritti, the soul must vote for justice against injustice. However, in nivritti, the soul must vote for God, even against justice, because God is the protector of the justice cow. The Lord of Justice, Lord Yama, he became a cow and he took shelter, he took the refuge of Lord Datta. And Lord Datta is protecting even Dharma, which is the protector of all of us. Dharma protects us and God protects Dharma. So we are doubly protected by God. Pravritti is the employer-employee relationship with God. In it, based on the merits and defects of the employee, both promotions, which is going to heaven, and demotions, which is going to hell, are given to the employee. But if an employed girl develops a personal love for the owner of the factory is analogous to God, and tries to become his wife, then nivritti starts for that employee. Nivritti is not there for everybody else. All other employees are happy being just employees. They work properly, they collect their salary. If they do something bad, they will get punishment. So most people are happy just being employees of that owner. The owner may be a very good person. Most people are happy just to become employees of that good person, good employer. But there's one particular girl who is interested. She's personally interested in him. She's not interested in his money. She's not interested in simply the salary and the benefits and promotions. She's not interested in that. She's personally interested in the owner. Okay, so she is on the path of nivritti. So note that nivritti starts only from the side of the employee and not from the side of the employer. So nivritti starts from the side of the devotee and not from the side of God. As the employee attempts to form a bond with the employer conducts severe tests to test the reality of her love towards him. So the employer wants to find out whether, is this girl interested in me because I am such a rich man? Because she wants to own all my property? Is that why she is interested? Or is she interested in me because she wants a promotion? So similarly, God also wants to make sure that when the devotee approaches him with devotion, whether the devotee has true love or not, or whether it is love filled with aspiration. Now, God already knows, but we don't know. We have a false impression about ourselves, and that is why God tests. God doesn't need to test us. We need the test. Anyway, so as the employee attempts to form a bond with the employer conducts severe tests to test the reality of her love towards him. He also tests to ensure that she is carrying out all her assigned duties in the office, which is worldly life. So the girl should not think that just because I have a relationship with the boss, I can follow some shortcuts in the office, or I can do some wrong things in the office. I cannot exploit my closeness with the employer to do wrong things in the office. So God also tests that, because if you fail in that part, you are disturbing the discipline of the company, which God does not like. The company owned by God is this creation. So pravrutti, any violations of pravrutti are not tolerated by God, even if we are a very close devotee. So if the soul fails in pravrutti, there is no entry into nivrutti. If the girl is corrupt in the office, she will loot the owner after getting married to him. Even though Ravana stood at number one in nivrutti by offering his 10 heads to God, Ravana was not allowed into nivrutti since he had failed in pravrutti. The fruit of nivrutti is the highest. Nivrittistu mahaphala compared to pravrutti. The employer takes. So why is nivrutti mahaphala? Because the employer takes personal responsibility of the employee after marriage. If he marries that girl, then the employer is going to take complete responsibility of her, because now she is not just an employee, now she is his wife. This is unlike the case of other employees, where the employer will only look after the welfare of the employees without taking any personal responsibility. But in the case of the wife, let us suppose that the wife is fined. The husband will pay the fine for it. Similarly, God enjoys the punishments of the sins of the climax devotee of nivrutti. But this is not possible in pravrutti, where rewards and punishments are purely given depending on the merits and defects of the employee. If you have some merits, if you have done some meritorious deed, you will get a reward. If you have done some bad deed due to your defects, you will get a bad fruit also. That is pravrutti. There God is not going to interfere. But in nivrutti, God will take up the punishment for the climax devotee's sins. The next point is sin in nivrutti and pravrutti. The devotee is expected to not commit any sin in pravrutti because sin disturbs the peace of the world. In nivrutti, which is confined to the personal relationship between God and the devotee, the so-called sin becomes ineffective. God personally compensates any victim of the sin committed by the devotee. For example, when Shankara left his mother for the sake of God, all the services to his mother were provided by God himself. God even gave her a huge extra benefit. He granted her salvation. No ordinary soul can grant that to his mother. If the same sin had been committed by a son in pravrutti, his mother would have suffered. So let's say a young boy, let's say his mother is old, he leaves her for the sake of for the love of another girl or for a prostitute. His mother would have suffered because God would not take care of her. In the case of Shankaracharya, he left the mother, he left the love of the mother for the love of God. He loved God, that is why he left the mother. So God took care of her. But if you are leaving your mother for the sake of some worldly girl or for a prostitute, God is not obliged to take care of her. Why should he take care of her? So in that case, it would be counted as a sin. So in pravrutti, it is a sin. But in nivrutti, it is not a sin. Shankaracharya was in nivrutti. Why did he leave the mother? Due to the love of God. So then it is not a sin. So it means that the world will suffer since, okay, so if his mother, so if Shankara had left his mother for the sake of, for some worldly reason, his mother would have suffered. And if his mother suffers, then it means the world suffers, because the world is made of individuals. It is just a collection of individuals. So it disturbs world peace. So committing a sin in pravrutti leads to a loss of world peace, while even a sin committed in nivrutti is not a sin, because God compensates any damage done. God has taken personal responsibility for that climax devotee. So let us say the devotee commits what is thought to be a sin. It is not a sin because God compensates that. This was told to God. This was told by God to Arjuna in the Gita. God told Arjuna not to be afraid of even committing sin for the sake of God, because God would liberate Arjuna from the punishment of that sin. The omnipotent God can indeed compensate any damage. Here, by liberating Arjuna from the punishment of sin does not mean that the omnipotent God will use his supreme power to cancel the punishment of the sin. liberation from the sin does not mean the cancellation of the sin through God's omnipotent power. God said, Sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami ma shuchah. Mokshayishyami, he said. So if it had meant, if God had meant cancellation of the sin, then he would have said, Sarva papani nashayishyami. I will destroy all of them. He did not say, I will destroy or I will cancel all the sin or the fruits of the sin just because I am omnipotent. I can cancel them, so I will cancel them. He did not say that. What he said is, I will liberate you from the punishment. So by doing that, he basically what he means is that he is not going to break his own constitution.
Yes.
Without breaking the constitution, he is going to liberate. And how is he going to liberate? He will pay the fine out of his own pocket.
Yes.
So what Swamiji is saying is that even in nivritti, God does not break his own constitution, which has been written for pravritti. When the husband says to his wife that he will liberate her from the fine imposed for her fault, it does not mean that the husband will go to the authorities and get the fine cancelled through his power. It only means that the husband will pay the fine from his own pocket. God Datta always liberates his climax devotees from their sins, not by cancelling the sins through his omnipotent power, but by bearing the punishments of their sins upon himself. In fact, in the case of God, even if God cancels the sins directly using his omnipotence, there is nobody to question him. In spite of this, he does not do so. He has not done so. Due to this very reason, the Veda says that there is nobody greater than God. See, if we get even a tiny amount of power, the first thing we want to do is to exploit that power. But you look at God's case, he is omnipotent. There is no power which he does not have. And yet he never exploits it. He will suffer for the sins of his own devotees rather than breaking his own constitution. And that is why he is the greatest. The Veda says, Natat samascha bhyadikasya tushyate parasya shakti vividhaiva shruyate. It is said in, I think, Aitareya Upanishad. It is said, Natat samaha. You cannot find anybody or anything even equal to God. Forget about anything greater than God. Greater than God is doubly impossible. Finding anybody even equal to God is impossible. Greater than that is out of question. Such great is the personality of God. That is why there are devotees who are mad after him. Why do these devotees, certain devotees we have seen in the Puranas, we have read about their stories, why are they so crazy about God? It is because he has such a wonderful personality. Swamiji, 18 points are over, 9 more are to go. I can continue, but otherwise if you want to take over, I'm okay.
No, you can continue.
Okay, Swamiji.
You can continue. This 18th point is a wonderful point.
Yes, Swamiji. Really wonderful.
My mind was blocked. I was shocked with that 18th point.
Yes, Swamiji.
His greatness. See, he will not go to the office which has put fine on his wife and
Yes.
do Gundaism, show his power to cancel the fine.
Yes.
But he will pay the fine from his pocket.
Correct.
That is Datta. All the incarnations of Datta have that characteristic. They suffer for their devotees. They transfer their diseases onto them.
Yes.
And suffer for their diseases,
Correct.
So they never attempt to cancel the fine. They only pay the fine from their pockets. That is the greatness of the incarnation of God Datta and the greatness of God Datta. That is why he is told as Natat samascha bhyadikascha.
Yes.
There is nobody equal to God Datta. Not to speak of greater than God. There is no equal even.
Yes.
How can you imagine greater than him? Even
Yes.
equal is not available. Huh?
Correct.
Wonderful point. That 18th point is a wonderful point.
Yes, Swamiji.
Yes, you can continue one more point, 1 or 2 points.
Yes, Swamiji. So the 19th point describes 3 types of devotion. This is very remarkable. Everybody can please pay attention to this. Swamiji has introduced a very beautiful concept here. The same love that exists in worldly bonds is called devotion when that love is in the bond with God. It is just old wine in a new bottle. This love or devotion is of 3 types. The first type is called controlled devotion. A devotee who is in pravritti has only this type of love for God. This type of devotion for God is unreal. In such controlled devotion to God, the devotee's real love is only for his or her worldly bonds. The devotee only shows false love for God to impress God so that the devotee can get God's protection for himself and his worldly bonds. So the first type, controlled devotion. There are 3 C's, okay? One is controlled devotion. The second devotion, the second C. This type of devotion is cunning devotion. This type of devotion exists in nivritti and it is real love for God. If the worldly relatives or the worldly bonds of the devotee are congenial to the devotee's devotion to God, the devotee receives full cooperation from them. However, in many cases, the worldly relatives oppose the devotee's devotion, especially when the devotee is devoted to the contemporary human incarnation of God and when the devotee's devotion becomes practical. As long as the devotee is devoted to some image of God, some idol of God, or some God energetic incarnation in the upper world, most people don't object to that. Majority of the people in our society, they don't object to that. But when the devotee is devoted to a human incarnation, many people start opposing. If the devotee is devoted to a contemporary, a living incarnation, living human incarnation, then the majority of the public will oppose. And even worse than that is when you are devoted to the contemporary living human incarnation of God and you are expressing that devotion in a practical way, in terms of practical sacrifice, practical service, then hardly anybody will remain who will not oppose. Almost 99% of the family members will start opposing. So this is the condition. So when this starts happening, when the devotee starts facing opposition, what can he do? What choice does the devotee have? Then the devotee should avoid this opposition from the relatives or the worldly bonds without hurting them. This can be done by keeping one's devotion to God secret. Rahasyam hetaduttamam, or atmanam rahasi sthitaha, as said in the Gita. Keep it secret. In this stage, the devotee has to deceive the worldly bonds by telling lies to them. Such deception, to deceive means to cheat. Okay, so such deception, such deceiving is not sinful because the devotee is avoiding fights with them and avoiding unnecessary worry and disturbance for them. The Gopikas did exactly this. The serpent-like Kundalini crossing the chakras is nothing but the awareness or the soul traveling in a curved way, in a serpentine way, like a serpent, to cross the worldly bonds. The serpentine way means deceptive way. If the soul goes straight, there will be disaster. So if the soul goes in this serpentine way, he can avoid all the problems. Awareness is a form of energy, and energy travels in the form of waves which are zigzag, they are not straight. If the soul or Kundalini tries to travel on the spiritual path straight, the soul will be cut into pieces by these chakras. What are chakras? Rotating wheels. So the various from the Muladhara to the Ajna Chakra, Swamiji has given, each stands for the bond with the mother, bond with the father, bond with the spouse, bond with the child. Anahata is the bond with the child that nobody can overcome. anahata. It is never hurt by anybody. It is never damaged by anybody. No one can destroy it. Then you have the Vishuddhi Chakra, which is with false gurus, the Ajna Chakra with the deities. All these are chakras which you have to skillfully navigate your way through them. Just as youngsters, when they are driving the motorcycle in peak traffic, the way they avoid, they don't, just because there is a vehicle in front of you, you cannot go accelerate and bang into that vehicle. And what will happen? Disaster for everybody. So what do? You skillfully weave your way through the traffic, so nobody is hurt. That is the idea. Nobody should be hurt. Neither your relative should be hurt, nor you should be hurt. You should go very skillfully so that you reach your destination very comfortably. That is the whole, that is yoga. The Kundalini, reaching the Sahasrara by this serpentine way, is yoga. So that is the skill. So crossing the selfish worldly bonds by telling lies is crossing Maya using Maya. Maya means deception. So you cross the deception using deception. It is like pulling out a thorn using another thorn. All this is told in the Yoga Shastra because yoga itself means reaching the contemporary human incarnation like God Krishna was to the Gopikas. The contemporary human incarnation is in front of us, just as Lord Krishna was in front of the Gopikas. We have to reach that contemporary human incarnation. That is our destination. But we don't want to create an accident in between. Without making an accident, you have to reach the destination. So this can be done either through a straight way or a curved way. If your relatives, your worldly bonds, they are supporting you, okay, you go in a straight way. You're not going to hurt anybody. But majority may not support you. So in that case, what should you do? Use a curved way. That is more, that is wiser. So cunning devotion, what is the first C is controlled devotion. The second C is cunning devotion. Cunning devotion means using that serpentine way. The third type of devotion is care not devotion, where the devotee stops caring about anything. Such devotion exists in the climax stage of nivrutti, in which the devotee does not care for the worldly bonds. The devotee becomes free from the worldly bonds, since these worldly bonds become ineffective in controlling the devotee. Normally, why we are trying to move in a serpentine way, because those relationships, with your parents, children, spouse, they control you. You don't want to hurt them, so they have some control over you. They will not allow you to go in a certain way. But when the devotee reaches the stage of madness, that devotee doesn't care at all who is stopping him, who is happy with him, who is not happy with him. That is the climax stage. And at that point, the devotee becomes free from worldly bonds, and the worldly bonds become ineffective in controlling the devotee. In this stage, the devotee reaches the final state of devotion called madness or unmada. Unmado maranam tataha, by not caring even for death. At that point, even death cannot threaten that devotee. Prahlada had reached that stage. Prahlada did not fear death. Meera had reached that stage. She drank poison. When in the court, they gave her death penalty by poison, by drinking poison. She just simply, she drank it as if you drink a bowl of payasam. A mad devotee cannot be controlled by anybody, and hence all the worldly obstructions disappear at this stage. The next 20th point is related to liberation, which means overcoming the 3 strongest worldly bonds. Swamiji says, as I have told again and again, nivrutti totally belongs to devotees, in which the devotee's real love for God is the entire driving force. God never told Prahlada, the Gopikas or Meera to become his devotees and to reach the climax stage in his devotion. The devotee's real devotion for God naturally springs forth by itself like a spring on a mountainside. It is the result of the devotion developed by the devotee in the past several births. When sages expressed their desire to embrace the beautiful Rama by becoming ladies through their miraculous powers, Rama refused it. This is because neither the wives of the sages nor his own wife would mind such an act of the sages. They all knew very well that the sages were males in reality, and hence there would be no opposition from the worldly bonds on both sides. In that situation, it was impossible to test whether the bond of the sages for God was the strongest bond. It could not be tested whether the bond with God was stronger than their bond with their wives. The bond with one's wife or bond with one's husband, that is called dareshana. The bond with the life partner, husband or wife, is one of the three strongest worldly bonds of a person. Testing the strength of their bond with God against this bond would have been a real serious test, which could not be conducted in that situation. In that situation, there was no competition between their bond with their wife and their bond with God. So no testing can be done. Moreover, the other two strongest bonds, which are the bonds with one's issues, which is putreshana, and the bond with wealth, which is dhaneshana, could not be tested through the proposal of the sages to embrace Rama. If the devotee defeats the attractions of these three strongest worldly bonds, the three strongest, that triad of these three strongest bonds is called Eshanatrayam. If the devotee is able to defeat the attraction of these Eshanatrayam due to his or her attraction to God, then that is salvation. But the attraction to God should be natural, and it should not be due to the attraction for some other worldly bond. For example, I desperately want to become rich, and I understand that I cannot be rich just by my effort. I know that if I pray to God, then with His superpower, I can be the richest person in the world. That is why I have tremendous devotion for God. Then tell me honestly, is that devotion for God or is it devotion for money? It is actually devotion for money. So one should not have devotion for God for the sake of getting some other worldly achievement. So because in that case, it is only the devotion for that worldly bond where God is only instrumental. So the attraction to God should be natural and it should not be due to the attraction for some other worldly bond. The person should be able to overcome the attraction to worldly bonds in a natural way without any effort. Only then can it be called salvation or the liberation from worldly bonds. Thus, the cause of the detachment from worldly bonds, moksha, must always be the attachment to God, which is yoga. So, yoga should be the cause for moksha. Yoga means attachment to God. Yoga means joining two items. In English, actually, there is a word called yoke, to yoke. You take the bull and you join it to the bullock cart. So you are yoking the ox. That has come from perhaps from the same root as yoga. I'm not a linguist, but it seems to be that. So yoga means joining two items. What are the two items you want to join? The soul and God. So attachment, we are the soul already. We want to join to God. That is yoga. So yoga should be the reason for moksha. You want to join to God and you want to liberate yourself from the worldly bonds. What are the worldly bonds? Three strongest worldly bonds. The bond with one's issues, bond with one's wife or husband, and the bond with money. If you can liberate yourself from these three, then you have moksha. But how can you liberate yourself from these three? Only if you have attachment to God. Then only that salvation or that liberation is truly meaningful. Otherwise, just a forcible detachment from the worldly bonds, that will not last. It may last for a short while and then with a double vigor, you may go back to the worldly bonds. So that is not real salvation. God Krishna conducted these three tests for the sages in the next births. So the sages requested to embrace him in the Treta Yuga during we see that in the Ramayanam. But God said, no, you have to wait. We can't have it now. You have to wait for Dwapar Yuga. When he came as Lord Krishna and when those sages were reborn as Gopikas, that is when the test started. So Krishna conducted these three tests for the sages in the next births when the sages were reborn as the Gopikas. As the female Gopikas, they had husbands, issues, and self-earned wealth, which is karma phala, in the form of butter. Butter was the wealth directly earned by the Gopikas through their hard work. The sacrifice of that butter to God Krishna was karma phala tyaga, done for God. The Veda speaks about the sacrifice of wealth to God. Dhanena tyage naike amrutatva manashu. Amrutatva means the highest goal can be achieved through dhana tyaga. Tyaga, sacrifice of dhana, of wealth. But here it is not clear which wealth it is. That wealth could be the wealth received from one's ancestors, or it could be the wealth that is earned by that person. But the hard-earned wealth, the wealth that is earned by that person through hard work, is special because the person has the strongest bond with that wealth, because he has really sweated and toiled day and night to achieve that wealth. So the bond with that wealth is very strong. So God wants you to sacrifice exactly that. God is not going to ask you to sacrifice what is easy to sacrifice. So, such self-earned wealth is the karma phala. It is the fruit of your action. Phala means fruit, karma means action. So, it is the karma phala. That wealth is the karma phala. God always competes only with the strongest worldly bond. Now, looking at the case of Lord Krishna, during the 10 childhood years of Lord Krishna, from his 6th year to his 16th year, God tested the Gopikas for their ability to overcome Putreshana and Dhaneshana for his sake. How did he test that? He did so by stealing the butter which they had saved for their issues in their houses. Stealing butter means he stole their karma phala. And that karma phala was meant for whom? It was meant for their putras. So for their children. So when he took the wealth, already he's cutting one bond, but that wealth was meant for their children, so he's cutting the second bond also. So it is a two in one test. That test was of double intensity. If you can accept, and not only accept, happily accept Krishna stealing your wealth, which was meant for your children, then it clearly means that you love Krishna more than wealth and more than your children, more than the double force of the child and wealth combined. This is what God wanted to test. He gave this double test of double level of difficulty. And yes, many of the Gopikas failed. They started criticizing Krishna. They complained to Yashoda. But some Gopikas passed that test, this double test. Okay, so two of the Eshanas were cut, two of the Eshanas were tested by Lord through this stealing of butter. For the next 2 years, from his 16th year to the 18th year, in the 18th year, at the end of the 18th year, he went to Mathura, he left Vrindavanam. But in that two-year period, 16 to 18, God Krishna tested the Gopikas for their ability to overcome the third bond, which is Dareshana. How did he do that? He did so by dancing with the Gopikas in Vrindavanam. Only 12 Gopikas passed all three tests and reached Goloka. Many failed in the test of stealing butter and complained to Yashoda, the mother of God Krishna. Krishna had plenty of butter in his house, and hence his stealing of butter was not out of any need, as in the case of a beggar stealing food. His stealing of the butter of the Gopikas was purely to test their bond with wealth. The degree certificate of real salvation was given only to the Gopikas who passed all the three tests. In the tests of Datta, there are only two results, passing or failure. Even 99% marks is only a failure, 100% alone is passing. Shall I take the next one also, Swamiji? Sorry, Swamiji, it's muted, Swamiji.
I will tell in Telugu from next Satsanga onwards.
Okay, Swamiji.
Because I will prepare that condensed form in Telugu.
Okay, Swamiji.
And then tell. I'm not prepared. I have not prepared.
Okay, Swamiji. Shall I proceed with
Yes,
the next?
you proceed. Very beautiful points you are explaining.
Yes, Swamiji, it's such a wonderful thing actually.
I
Points
forgot myself.
yes, Swamiji.
Immersed.
Your points are excellent, Swamiji.
Oh, how intelligent is God Datta, huh?
Yes, yes.
That is why he is called as Guru Datta.
Correct. The 21st point, this is about, since we were talking about Lord Krishna's testing of the Gopikas, there is a lot of confusion in this matter, and many people actually blame Lord Krishna for the illegitimate behavior. But now in this 21st point, Swamiji is going to explain that illegitimate behavior is not illegitimate behavior. These are the incarnations tests for the climax devotees. So let's read further. God opposes Nivritti, and hence Rama refused the proposal of the sages. Not only this, even Krishna opposed Nivritti by saying that the Gopikas should return to their homes and that their coming to meet him in Vrindavanam at midnight was the highest sin. He warned them that they would have to face horrible hell for that sin. God only supports pravritti by all means. God said in the Gita that legitimate sex is as holy as God. Dharma viruddha bhuteshu kamosmi bharatarshabha, he says. So dharma aviruddha. Viruddha means opposite. Aviruddha means in the same direction. So kamaha is sex. Sex which is in the same direction as dharma, which is not opposite to dharma. That is as holy as God. That is what, when he says kamosmi bharatarshabha, it means I am the sex that is in the direction of dharma. It means that legitimate sex is as holy as I am. That is the meaning. It doesn't mean God is literally a quality. God is not a quality. So God supports, the main point is that God supports pravritti by all means, and anybody violating pravritti is discouraged very strongly. God doesn't encourage anybody to violate pravritti. In fact, even nivritti devotees trying to violate pravritti for God's sake, as part of the nivritti, they are choosing God over justice. Even to those devotees, he doesn't encourage. He puts hurdles in their ways. Okay, so that is, people are trying to blame Lord Krishna for his illegitimate behavior. But before blaming God, we should first understand how serious he is about maintaining pravritti. He is not like a worldly person who is very eager to break dharma and the laws of pravritti. Moreover, we find Krishna lifted the Govardhana hill on his finger before carrying out these tests on the Gopikas to warn others who are trying to imitate God. It means that any soul should first lift the hill on his finger before trying to steal others' wealth or before engaging in illegitimate romance. If anybody has the idea of imitating Krishna in stealing or imitating Krishna by illegitimate romance, first that person should lift a mountain on his finger. In another discourse, Swamiji has said, at least you try to lift one big rock. If you can succeed in lifting a big rock, then we can discuss further. Okay, but Krishna lifted a whole mountain. That is impossible for anybody. Even lifting a big rock is not possible for you. And then why should we do this stupidity of trying to imitate the rest of his behavior? But many people try to do that. By showing that miracle, Krishna ensured that no one would imitate him after misinterpreting his behavior and then spoil the field of pravritti. Justice in the world should not be spoiled. But people are doing that, and they quote that I am doing this. What is wrong in that? Krishna also did that. You are not Krishna. Can you lift a mountain? You cannot lift a mountain. You cannot even lift a rock. Then how can you compare yourself with Krishna? No other incarnation did such acts of stealing and dancing with married ladies, and hence they did not have to lift the hill on their finger. Krishna had to do that to show that he is special and that nobody should imitate him. The Gopikas were sages who had been doing penance for God for the past millions of births. Penance means loving God. Radha was the incarnation of sage Durvasa, and Durvasa was an incarnation of God Shiva. Krishna was the greatest God, Paripurnatamas Sakshat. Krishna never returned to Vrindavanam after completing these tests for the Gopikas, and he never repeated these tests elsewhere in his entire life. Later on, he did marry 16,108 girls, but he married them legitimately. He never stole or engaged in illegitimate sex anywhere at any time. In doing such acts in Vrindavan, we should only see Krishna as the examiner of the sages. He conducted those tests for them only to grant them the degree of salvation. He did not do so with any crooked angle in mind. The case was just like that of a male doctor performing the delivery of a pregnant female patient. The doctor concentrates only on the delivery of the child. He does not have any idea of illegal romance. So before we try to imitate God's behavior, we should be very clear as to who Lord Krishna is and who we are. And clearly that behavior of Lord Krishna, it may, from the pravritti angle, it may appear to be illegitimate, but actually it is not illegitimate if you understand the background of who the sages were, who Lord Krishna was, and what his purpose was. If we understand these 3 points, there will be no confusion. Moving ahead. This is the 22nd point, and this is related to how people try to justify the illegitimate behavior of God Krishna, what the actual reason was, and how other people have tried to justify it. So that this Swamiji is going to explain. I am dealing with this topic related to God Krishna's behavior with the Gopikas at length because it is a very important point. This crucial topic is easily misunderstood by several people. Even other religions point the finger at God Krishna in this context. The ability to understand the Bhagavatam from the correct angle is said to be the most severe test of the spiritual knowledge of a scholar. Vidyavatam Bhagavate Pariksha. In understanding the Bhagavatam is the real test of a scholar, the most severe test. Why is it so? This is because the Bhagavatam describes the illegitimate love of the Gopikas for Krishna, and yet learning the Bhagavatam from sage Shuka gave salvation to Parikshit in just 7 days. So you see the contrast over here. What does the Bhagavatam describe? It describes illegitimate love. And what is the fruit of understanding the Bhagavatam? You will get salvation within 7 days. Right? What is this contrast? How can you explain this? If it is so pure that it is going to give you salvation in 7 days, like Parikshit got, then how come the impure things like illegitimate romance are described in it? So that is why it is the greatest test for the scholar to explain these points. If the person can explain these points, then he is a true scholar. So since Swamiji mentioned Parikshit, even that Parikshit, he also questioned the behavior of Krishna in this context. He said the Gopikas were married ladies. So he asks Paradara Bhimarshanam in the Bhagavatam. They are somebody else's wives. How did Krishna engage in romance with them? In asking that question, Parikshit forgot that it was the same Krishna who had brought him back to life when he was born dead. Parikshit was born dead because of the Brahmastra released by Ashwatthama, and it was Lord Krishna who revived him. So that part Parikshit forgot who Lord Krishna was. Sage Shuka explained to Parikshit that God Krishna was unaffected by any sin, just as the light of the sun is unaffected even if it enters the dirty water of a drain. But the above explanation given by God Datta is much better than the explanation given by Sage Shuka. This is because the answer given by Shuka justifies the behavior of Krishna through the omnipotence of God, whereas the explanation given above by Swamiji justifies the behavior of Krishna even within the framework of the Pravritti constitution written by the same God. So there was nothing illegitimate actually. And the sages were, the Gopikas were reborn sages. Krishna was testing, they themselves had approached Krishna. They wanted to have salvation. They wanted to be liberated. What is salvation? It is the liberation from worldly bonds. They themselves asked for it. Krishna was simply doing what they asked. So where is the illegitimacy over there? It is perfectly legitimate. And did Krishna do it for his own out of his own interest? No, he did not do it out of his own interest. What is the evidence for that? He did not repeat it anywhere else. He did not return back to Vrindavan to enjoy the same illegitimate romance again. He didn't do that. So the explanation given by Swamiji is excellent, because it, within the framework of the constitution written by God, without twisting anything, without unnecessarily calling in the omnipotence of God, the explanation can be given. Several scholars are confused on this topic, and many have tried to twist facts by saying that Krishna was only an 11-year-old boy when he left Vrindavanam for Mathura. He danced with the Gopikas just before that, which means that he was just a child when he danced with the Gopikas. This is what those scholars are saying. So they claim that there could not have been any sexual contact between them. But they forget that Rama also got married to Sita at the age of 12. Sita was 6. So why should you twist the truth when the case can be dismissed in the court with the perfect explanation of the truth itself? When you have killed somebody with your pistol, why should you twist the truth and say that you were firing the bullet in the air and that the bullet accidentally went in the wrong direction? This is totally unnecessary, because you can easily escape the punishment by simply explaining the truth, which is that you killed the person since he was trying to kill you. One commentator on the Bhagavatam writes that Krishna was involved in the illegitimate sexual act with the Gopikas, but that he did so without the leakage of sperm. Reme retah skhalanam vina. Without reta is semen or sperm. Without the leakage of sperm, he did it. So the Gopikas did not get pregnant. If the omnipotent God can control the leakage of sperm during copulation, can he also not prevent pregnancy despite the leaking of sperm? Moreover, will a rapist be excused by the judge if he says that he raped a girl without leaking his sperm? Hence, it is far better to understand the apparently illegitimate romantic acts of God Krishna for what they really were. Instead of trying to twist these facts, we should understand why he was actually doing it. They were God's tests of the devotion of the sages who had been reborn as the Gopikas, to see if the sages could overcome their bonds with their life partners due to their strongest bond with God Krishna. Why was that necessary to test? Because they wanted liberation. They asked Lord for liberation. That is why he was doing it. See, when you apply for some people, they want to have a government job. So they write the UPSC exam. They themselves filled the application form that please accept my candidacy for that UPSC exam. And then they go to the examination hall, and the examiner is definitely going to ask him questions. Then you cannot blame the examiner. Why did you ask me difficult questions? The examiner said, look, I never invited you. You came, you applied, you paid the fees for the exam. You have come over here. Now it is your duty to answer the question. So similarly, it was a test given by God in response to their request. Moving to the next question, the 23rd point. Radha got a higher divine fruit than Rukmini. Radha was married to Ayana Ghosha, and Radha was elder to Krishna. Radha loved Krishna and did not allow her husband to even touch her. Radha married Krishna secretly through a special type of marriage called the Gandharva Vivaha. It is an informal marriage with just the exchange of rings. The married life of Radha and Krishna was also highly secret. Rukmini also faced the threat of marriage with Shishupala. But Shishupala was not a good person, and Rukmini did not want that. She absolutely did not want to marry Shishupala. She only wanted to marry Krishna. But in the marriage function, even before the actual marriage, she ran away with Krishna secretly. Sage Manu says that if a marriage between a boy and a girl is fixed by the elders in the family, the marriage is only partially done. The girl is called the promised bride, or the Vacha Datta, since the father of the bride has given his word that the girl will be given in marriage to that particular boy. In that sense, Rukmini was only partially married to Shishupala. But the marriage was not completed, because the ritual involving the recitation of Vedic hymns had not taken place. So she was not mantra datta. The mantras had not been recited. Moreover, the bride had not dedicated her entire mind to the groom. So she was not manodatta. Her mind was not given to Shishupala. The ethical scripture says that only after the completion of these three stages can the marriage be said to be complete. Rukmini escaped with Krishna before her marriage with Shishupala, before the marriage with Shishupala could be completed. But she married Krishna completely and became his legitimate wife. Finally, we conclude that Radha reached God through an illegitimate path and Rukmini reached God through a legitimate path. As per the constitution of Pravritti, Radha should go to hell and Rukmini should go to the abode of God. Rukmini reached the abode of God as per the constitution, but Radha did not go to hell. Instead, she went to Goloka, which is even above the abode of God. The fruit given to Radha violates the constitution of Pravritti. In Nivritti, the path to God is always legitimate. Whether it is legitimate or illegitimate in Pravritti, we have already seen that earlier. Voting for justice against injustice is Pravritti, and voting for God even against justice is Nivritti. This point itself brings out the specialty of Radha, because Radha voted for God even against justice, whereas Rukmini only voted for God and justice against injustice. For Rukmini, God and justice were standing on one side, and injustice was standing on another side. So on one side was Shishupala, injustice, and another side was Krishna, standing for justice. So the choice was simple. You have to reject injustice, you have to choose justice. Even from the angle of Pravritti, Rukmini was correct. When her mind was already given to Krishna and not to Shishupala, fixing her marriage with Shishupala was the injustice, even as per Pravritti. Because in mind, she had already become Krishna's. Rukmini always fought against justice. She followed justice by marrying the groom to whom she had given her mind. This, even according to sage Manu, that is correct. So if she has given her mind to Krishna, she should marry Krishna. She should not marry anybody else. Her family was forcing her to do injustice, which she rejected. So she rejected injustice, she followed justice. Hence, pravritti, which is the worldly life of justice, continued throughout her approach. Her pravritti happened to be nivritti because the bridegroom happened to be God. She did not have to make any special effort for nivritti. Radha's case was different. Her spiritual life of devotion, nivritti, was separate from her worldly life of pravritti. Her pravritti was being the wife of Ayana Ghosha. Her nivritti was being devoted to Krishna. They were two different things. In Rukmini's case, being devoted to Krishna was pravritti for her and also nivritti for her. So there was no distinction between that. So as per pravritti, Radha was wrong to develop a bond of true love with Krishna. But as per nivritti, she was right in developing the bond of true love with Krishna. Fighting against pravritti for the sake of nivritti was the specialty of Radha. Rukmini did not have that specialty. She took the support of pravritti in attaining nivritti. Meaning, it is like, I will be devoted to you. You become my husband. So I can simultaneously, because anyway I will have to be devoted to my husband. So instead, Lord Krishna, you just become my husband. So my pravritti and nivritti both will be simultaneously completed. So that is the approach. Whereas Radha was not like that. Radha had already married Ayana Ghosha, and she had to leave Ayana Ghosha, means mentally as well as physically, she had to separate herself from Ayana Ghosha in order to go to Krishna. So Rukmini took the support of pravritti in attaining nivritti. Her approach was basically pravritti throughout. Incidentally, it also happened to be nivritti because her husband happened to be God. Now, the general fruit of following pravritti is heaven. Had Rukmini's husband been an ordinary human being, Rukmini would have merely gone to heaven. But Rukmini went to the abode of God because her husband incidentally happened to be God. So the fruit of pravritti can at the maximum be the abode of God if pravritti is used to support nivritti. If pravritti is not used to support nivritti, if pravritti is pursued independently, you will only get heaven at the maximum. Okay, but since it was also supporting nivritti, the maximum fruit one can attain is the abode of God. The fruit of nivritti, however, is goloka, which is even above the abode of God. Because in nivritti, even pravritti is opposed. The devotee has to oppose even pravritti for the sake of God. This is what Radha did. She rejected her husband for the sake of Krishna. Anyway, both these cases have to be taken only as tests conducted by God. They are the tests of the devotee's detachment from worldly bonds for the sake of the attachment with God. Rukmini sacrificed her bonds with her parents and brothers for the sake of her bond with God. Radha sacrificed her bond with her legal husband for the sake of the bond with God. Between these two cases of sacrifice, which is higher and more severe? Certainly the test of Radha is most severe in the view of the established tradition in those days, when marriage once performed could never be broken under any circumstances. Hence Radha was given a higher fruit than Rukmini. Radha had taken a more serious risk than Rukmini due to her real love for God. Even Rukmini had written to Krishna that if he ignores her proposal to marry her, she would commit suicide, but she would never marry anybody other than Krishna. Krishna had received an invitation to attend the wedding of Shishupala and Rukmini. With the wedding invitation in one hand and Rukmini's love letter in another hand, Krishna was swaying from side to side like a cradle. He was hesitating to marry Rukmini because of the invitation that he had received. God always supports pravritti and discourages nivritti, since nivritti is the field in which God is always projected as the central hero. But committing suicide for the sake of God is the climax of real love of nivritti. Once he read that point of Rukmini wanting to commit suicide, he immediately rushed to the city of Rukmini, Vidarbha. Radha attained a higher fruit than Rukmini only by a very narrow margin. Rukmini never did any injustice to reach God, and hence her approach was totally pravritti. It was only namesake nivritti. Radha rejected pravritti in toto and even committed injustice without fearing hell for the sake of real nivritti. Rukmini travelled along the riskless path, the path without any risk, to attain God, whereas Radha dared to travel on the path filled with the risk of hell to attain the same God. Goloka is just above the abode of God, indicating the very marginal distance between Rukmini and Radha. The case of Satyabhama or Satya, the incarnation of goddess Earth, was one without even a trace of risk. The father of Satya presented the divine diamond Syamantaka to Krishna along with his daughter Satya. Hence the distance between earth and the abode of God, which are indicative of the difference between Satya and Rukmini, is huge. Earth is the middle world. In between there are 6 lokas, and then the Brahma Loka is which is the abode of God, is the 7th loka. So there is a huge difference between those levels. Whereas between Brahmaloka and Goloka, there is only a slight difference. So that is what Swamiji is saying. So Satya got passing marks. Rukmini got, let's say passing marks is like 40 marks. Okay, Satya got passing marks. Rukmini got 90 marks and Radha got 100 marks. Rukmini and Satya are souls, whereas Radha was an incarnation of God Shiva. In the case of Satya, it was like a unanimous election without any voting, since only one candidate stood for election. So automatically he got elected without the need for any voting. Satya simply followed the path of justice in pravritti to attain God and remained at the ground level of the earth, being the incarnation of Mother Earth. She never had to fight against justice or injustice in her journey. Rukmini always fought against injustice and chose justice. She never had the opportunity to fight against justice to attain God. Radha was always placed in a position where she had to fight against justice to attain God. The Vaikuntha of Rukmini and the Goloka of Radha are just adjacent to each other, even though Goloka is above Vaikuntha, which is the abode of God. Vaikuntha, Brahmaloka, that is the abode of God. Above that is Goloka. But between Vaikuntha and Bhuloka, Bhuloka is earth, the distance is very long. 6 worlds exist in between. Satya never had the opportunity to vote. Rukmini and Radha had to vote. Both voted for God. But Rukmini voted for God against injustice, while Radha voted for God against justice. Satya faced no risk in pravritti. She had rajas, the quality of Brahma, which leads to high analytical activity. Rukmini faced some risk in pravritti, which appeared to be nivrutti, that her pravritti was also uh, incidentally nivrutti. She had the sattvam quality of Vishnu since she was an incarnation of Lakshmi, the power of Vishnu. Radha faced the highest risk in real nivrutti. She had the tamas or firmness of Shiva since she was an incarnation of Shiva. The next point is the 24th point. This is related to divine madness and salvation. Since God does not support nivrutti, the success in nivrutti is possible only with the third stage of devotion, which is madness for God, that care not devotion. I told you those 3 C's. One is controlled devotion, second is cunning devotion, and the third is care not devotion, where the devotee completely uh, goes to such an extent, the climax extent of madness for God, that he or she does not care about anyone or anything other than God. So, since God does not support nivrutti, the success in nivrutti is possible only with the third stage of devotion, which is madness for God, which is that care not devotion. A student studied spiritual knowledge from a preacher and became mad for God. He would simply roam on the banks of the river, intoxicated in devotion. Not intoxicated with alcohol, intoxicated with devotion. Some people went and informed the preacher that his student has become mad for God. The preacher wept, not because his disciple had gone mad, but because he himself could not achieve such divine madness in spite of having preached the same spiritual knowledge to so many disciples in the past. So that verse is Unmattavat sancharatiha shishyah taveti lokasya vachamsi shrunvan खिद्यनुवाचास्य गुरु पुराहो unmatta me nahi tadrishiti. That is the verse which says that he is saying, why have I not achieved that kind of madness which my disciple has achieved? A gopika called Chandralekha would secretly meet Krishna in the midnight. She was in the stage of cunning devotion for a long time. One night, she was obstructed by her family members from going to Krishna. But she could not enter the third stage of care not devotion, which is madness for God. She was unable to completely push away her family members and run for Krishna. She stood at the door, experiencing both extreme joy and extreme pain. She immediately collapsed there itself. She left her body and reached God. Her case can be explained in this way. She felt the climax of joy in the memories of Krishna. Simultaneously, she also felt the climax of pain on being prevented from reaching Krishna. Through her deep joy, all the fruits of her good deeds got exhausted. And through her deep pain, all the fruits of her bad deeds got exhausted. Finally, no balance of the fruits of her deeds remained, and that the balance of fruits of deeds is called karmashesha or prarabdha. None of it remained. That balance of the fruits of deeds is the cause for the rebirth of a soul. Since that balance was fully exhausted in her case, she got salvation. No need for further rebirth because that balance is exhausted. The Veda says that when both merits and sins are exhausted, the soul reaches God. Papa punya vidhuya. She could not reach she could reach God's energetic incarnation in the upper world after leaving her physical human body. This is Videha Mukti. She could not reach God's contemporary human incarnation while she was alive in that birth on earth. So she could not get Jivan Mukti. People feel that the two types of salvation, Jivan Mukti and Videha Mukti, respectively mean that the self attains salvation while being alive, and the self attains salvation after leaving the body. Actually, the word Atman, the self means the Atman. Okay, so the Atman can attain Jivan Mukti or the Atman can attain Videha Mukti. The common understanding is that Jivan Mukti means when we are living, we should get liberation. Videha Mukti, according to the common understanding, is that after we leave this body in the upper world, we should get liberation. That is what people understand. But what Swamiji is saying is the word Atman means body with a soul, but here the word Atman or self should be taken to mean the incarnation of God. The word self refers to the medium of God, which is a body with the soul. Hence, Jivan Mukti means attaining the living contemporary human incarnation of God, and Videha Mukti means attaining the energetic incarnation of God in the upper world after leaving the physical human body. So Jivan Mukti means when the incarnation is alive and in front of you, contemporary human incarnation, to attain that incarnation, to attain his grace, to completely surrender to him, that is Jivan Mukti. And Videha Mukti means not here, but in the upper world, you surrender to the energetic incarnation. That is Videha Mukti. The next point is about the real mad love for God. Sage Narada wrote in his Bhakti Sutram that the devotee should be madly in love with God, like a girl is madly in love with her boyfriend, or like a married lady is madly in love with her illegitimate lover. Narada writes, Jaravacha, he is defining what bhakti is. And he says it is like the illegitimate relationship. Like the girl loves her illegitimate lover, like that is devotion. In the next verse, the sage also gives the living example of the above as the gopikas of Vraja. Yatha Vrajagopikana. So, how should devotion be? It should be like the love for your lover, illegitimate lover. Who is the example of that? He says, the gopikas of Vrindavan, the gopikas of Vraja are the example of that. Here, the sage is not encouraging illegitimate sex in worldly life of pravrutti through the above two sutras. He is only giving the example of the strongest real love that can be found in worldly life. Such strongest love happens to be in an illegitimate affair. Such love is only an example given for us to understand how our strongest real love for God should be. Even though this simile is an impure simile, it is a nichopama, it was selected by the sage to explain the concept because it aptly describes the extreme strength of love. The strength of the love in this worldly illegitimate bond is so high that the lady can overcome an enormous amount of opposing force. She is not even afraid of the horrible punishment in hell. Even Krishna told the Gopikas to go back to their homes since their affair with him would lead them to terrible hell. But the Gopikas told Krishna that God Krishna was their real living husband and their human husbands were only images of their real husband. They also told Krishna that God alone is the real male or Purusha and that every soul is after all a female. The soul is said to be Paraprakriti, which is part of creation. Prakriti is creation, creation is feminine. The creator is masculine. The Sanskrit word for husband is Bharta. It means the maintainer, Bibharti iti. The wife is called the Bharya, which means the maintained, the one who is maintained. Bhriyate iti. Bhriyate iti Bharya. Ultimately, God is the Bharta and all souls are the Bharyas. Meaning, God is alone is the husband of all souls, irrespective of their superficial gender, which only pertains to their physical bodies. This is also told in the Rigveda. It is said, Striyas satihi tamume pumsa ahuhu. The Veda is clearly saying that these souls, they are striyas, but we were told that we were told that they are males. Actually, they are not males. They are females. All the souls, whether you see a man or a woman in front of you, they are only females from the absolute point of view. From God's point of view, they are only females. And they are wives of God. They are striyas and they are satis of God. And not only striyas, not only females, they are the wives of God. Hence, the sages wanted to become females and the wives of Rama and then embrace him. The Gopikas, when Krishna tried to discourage them and wanted to send them home, the Gopikas questioned Krishna after telling him a story. Here's how the story goes. A husband went abroad for business. His wife worshipped an image of him daily while he was away. One day, the husband returned and was knocking the bolted doors of the house while the wife was busy worshipping the image of her husband. Now, we are asking you, the Gopikas are asking Krishna, whether the wife should continue to worship the image of her husband or should she immediately leave the worship and run and open the door for her actual living husband. So what the Gopikas are saying is they were married ladies, they are married to some human beings. So those human beings, they are only like representatives. They are husbands, but they are only representatives of the true husband. Who's the true husband? God is the true husband. Who is that God? He is Krishna. So when the real husband is there, why should I go for the representative model of the true husband? So they gave this example and then they questioned him. Now, why are you telling us to go back? Krishna did not answer their question, appreciating their depth of spiritual knowledge with a sweet smile. He got down from the tree on which he was sitting. We must remember that the Gopikas were not merely uneducated milkmaids. They were the most learned sages reborn as the Gopikas. The Gopikas did not care at all for their torture in hell as threatened by Krishna. Instead, they gave a counter threat to Krishna by saying that they would jump into the Yamuna river if he refused them. In another incident, God Krishna pretended to have a headache. No doctor could cure his headache. Finally, he said that it could be cured only if the dust of the feet of his true devotee is applied to his forehead. Sage Narada went to the Gopikas and asked them for the dust of their feet to cure the headache of Krishna. The Gopikas gave plenty of the dust of their feet at once to the sage. The sage threatened them, saying that they would go to a horrible hell if Krishna applied that dust of their feet to the head. But the Gopikas replied that they were ready to go to hell if the headache of Krishna would be cured. Narada had already asked all the 16,108 wives of Krishna for the dust of their feet, but they had all refused, saying that they would go to hell if the dust of their feet were applied to the forehead of Krishna. Krishna had married 16,108 girls and fathered 10 sons and 1 daughter through each of them. Is this single point not sufficient to say that Krishna is the omnipotent God? When the finger of Krishna got cut while he was eating sugarcane, all his wives ran to fetch a piece of cloth to bandage his finger. But Draupadi, who was performing the Rajasuya Yajna, immediately tore her new sari and bandaged the wounded finger of Krishna with it. She knew that if her new sari was torn while performing the ritual, she would become poor. Shortly afterwards, she actually lost all her wealth and kingdom in the game of dice played by her husbands with the wicked Kauravas. But she never scolded Krishna for being careless in getting his finger cut, due to which she had to face poverty. Any other soul would have definitely scolded Krishna in that situation. The reality of love is known only through a fire test. Even Sudama did not scold Krishna while returning home, even though Krishna did not help him in any way. The fruits given by God were infinite for the real devotees, real love of these devotees, who did not aspire for any fruit in return. Draupadi was granted an infinite number of saris to protect her honor while she was being disrobed in the court, and Sudama was granted infinite wealth to support his starving family. Swamiji, 2 more points are remaining, Swamiji. Shall I continue? Sorry, it's muted, Swamiji.
Yes, complete.
Okay, sir. 26th point. This is about justice, injustice, and the rewards from God. In both pravritti and nivritti, every devoted soul should like whatever God likes and dislike whatever God dislikes. In pravritti, every soul must like justice and dislike injustice, which matches with what God likes and dislikes. In nivritti, God likes whatever the devotee likes and dislikes whatever the devotee dislikes. God becomes the servant of the climax devotee. Sages prayed to Rama, saying, O lotus-eyed God, why are you not showing your kindness towards us? In the next birth, Krishna ran after the Gopikas, praying, O lotus-eyed Gopi, why are you not showing kindness towards me? So we see that the roles are reversed. The Gopikas were sages in their previous births when they had written several ethical scriptures. However, upon being reborn as the Gopikas, they gave their final and highest conclusion on what is justice and what is injustice. The following verse from the Shri Krishna Bhagavatam, composed by Shri Datta Swami, describes that final conclusion of the Gopikas on justice and injustice. This verse I'm going to read out. This is really a verse that is worth memorizing. The most fantastic verse which really tells what the path of nivritti is. It explains to us what the path of nivritti is. The verse goes as follows. Papa punya vivekaya putoyam grantha vistaraha harekkopakaram papam punyam tasya priyapradam. I'll read it again. Papa punya vivekaya kutoyam grantha vistaraha harekkopakaram papam punyam tasya priyapradam. The meaning of this is, who is saying this? The Gopikas are saying this. Who are the Gopikas? They are the sages who are the authors of Dharma Shastras. The authors of Dharma Shastras, when they were reborn as the Gopikas, got this final realization of what Dharma is. What is true Dharma? That they understood. What is Dharma? What is Dharma? It is what is Papa, what is Punya. It is the discrimination between Papa and Punya. The real realization they got in the Janma of the Gopikas. And what is that realization that they have expressed in these words? What are those words? Why have we written so many ethical scriptures to decide what is a good deed, Punya, and what is a bad deed, Papa? Doing whatever God likes is a good deed, and doing whatever God dislikes is a bad deed for any devotee of God. So this is in the Shri Krishna Bhagavatam, composed by Shri Datta Swami. So the Gopikas are the greatest sages. They are the authors of the Dharma Shastras, and this is the final essence of the Dharma Shastras, as well as of spirituality. The final nivritti is this. Such a wonderful statement. Whatever we do for God, God will return everything to us in plenty, at the most appropriate time and in the most appropriate manner. But our attitude should only be of real love, in which there are no accounts between us and God. Keeping accounts is only business, it's not love. Draupadi gave Krishna just a tiny piece of cloth with real love. He kept no accounts and she kept no accounts and did not aspire for anything in return from him. God reciprocated to her real love. He returned thousands and thousands of saris to her when it was most needed by her. If it had been a business transaction involving the principal amount and the interest, God would at the most return one full sari for the small piece of cloth that she had given him earlier. That would have been extremely insufficient to protect her honor while she was being disrobed by the evil Kauravas in the court. When Draupadi cried for protection in that situation, Krishna responded because of the practical devotion that she had expressed earlier, in which she had practically sacrificed the piece of cloth torn from her sari. Krishna did not respond to her theoretical devotion expressed through her cries for help. A practical fruit is always given for the devotee's practical devotion and not for the devotee's theoretical devotion or theoretical knowledge. As soon as Krishna heard the cry of Draupadi, he immediately searched in her account book for what practical devotion she has expressed for him. He found that one small piece of cloth that she had sacrificed to him. but the sacrifice was done out of pure love for him and not due to the aspiration for any fruit in return. Hence, he granted her countless number of saris in that critical situation. Hence, devotees should always be very careful and apply a lot, and you pay a lot of attention to this point. We should never have the attitude of business with God. We should always have pure love for God, which we should express both theoretically and practically without the aspiration for any fruit in return. If we clean up our mind in this one aspect, we have cleaned it up in all aspects. Our aspiration for some fruit from God in return is the reason why God does not respond to our prayers, worship, service, and sacrifice done to Him. We must note that God always tests our ability to worship Him through channels or ways that are open for us. He never tests us in our ability to worship Him through channels that are impossible or closed for us. If the devotee is unable to practically sacrifice either his efforts or the fruit of his work to God, God will not test the devotee in those channels. If the devotee is incapable of performing karma sannyasa or karma phalatyaga, if he is truly incapable, we may think we are incapable, actually we are capable many times. Okay, but if the devotee is truly incapable of doing that, then God is not going to test in that devotee in that manner. In that case, God will be pleased with the devotee if he merely worships God theoretically through knowledge and devotion alone. God tested the Gopikas in their ability to sacrifice butter, which was their hard-earned wealth, because they possessed butter. It was the sacrifice of their hard-earned wealth, it was the karma phala tyaga, and that channel of practical sacrifice, practical karma phala tyaga, was very much open to them. They possessed that butter, they were capable of sacrificing it. So God tested them in the channel that was open to them. So it was a fair game. It is not an unfair game. If the devotee doesn't have something, how can you ask the devotee to sacrifice that? So God definitely is the most fair in his tests. When we complain that God is unfair, it means our analysis is lacking. The last point, this is the essence of spiritual knowledge. The recognition of the contemporary human incarnation can be done only if the devotee conquers ego and jealousy. For example, God Datta has unimaginable beauty. God Datta and God Brahma are one and the same because God Brahma is the divine preacher of spiritual knowledge. He is the Satguru, being the author of the 4 Vedas, and he preaches in an excellent way since his wife is Goddess Saraswati, who sits on his tongue. God Datta is also the divine preacher of knowledge and preaches in an excellent way. There is no trace of difference between God Datta and God Brahma. Of course, the same God Datta or God Brahma acts as Vishnu and Shiva further while ruling and smashing the creation respectively. Every devotee tries to project himself as very smart, and this is ego. The devotee tries to reduce the smartness of the other human being, and that is jealousy. In ancient days, due to this ego and jealousy, devotees tried to reduce the smartness of God Datta or God Brahma by presenting God Brahma with a long white beard and called him the grandfather. He is called Pitamaha. For the first time, Datta Swami projected God Brahma as God Datta and described God Brahma as the most beautiful personality in his composed prayer on God Brahma. One verse which many times all of us have sung, Trijagan Mohana Sundarangam, Kashaya Dharam Panditesham. Swamiji describes Trijagan Mohana. He is the one who has all the 3 worlds shocked by his unimaginable beauty. So that is God Brahma, who is none other than God Datta. The human devotee, after conquering ego, which is self-projection, and jealousy, the tendency to reduce the importance of others, can only become a traveler or jnata or drashta in the spiritual path, which is the first component in the triad. The triad of spirituality or the triputi in the spiritual path, the first is the jnata. Then the devotee should reduce self-projection and should try to glorify God. When ego and jealousy are conquered, this divine behavior develops. The second component of the triad is the path in which the traveler takes up the journey to reach the goal. In the path, knowledge, devotion, and practical devotion involving service and sacrifice are the main concepts. The goal should be God in his contemporary human form, which is relevant to humanity, and not in his energetic form, which is relevant to the upper world, consisting of only energetic beings. Devotees unnecessarily waste their time trying to do penance to see the energetic form of God, and then no time is left for their spiritual effort or sadhana in this short human life. If devotees fall further lower to the level of worshipping inert photos and statues of unavailable energetic incarnations and past human incarnations, sometimes they also do that. Hence, God in human form before our eyes, since God is in human form before our eyes, the repulsion between the common media develops, ego and jealousy in us. Out of the 6 vices arranged in ascending order of strength, Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, and Matsarya, from left to right, ego and jealousy occupy the last 2 places. If you don't conquer ego and jealousy, you will lose the human incarnation on earth and also the energetic incarnation in the upper world after this human life. After death, the soul goes to the upper world in an energetic body, and experiences repulsion between the common energetic media of God in an energetic form, and since the soul also is an energetic form. As a result, the devoted soul loses God in his or her life here as well as in the afterlife. This is a permanent loss, which is everywhere and at all times, and it is told in the Veda as Mahati Vinashtihi. It is a colossal loss, tremendous loss, total loss. This last 27th point is the essence of the entire spiritual knowledge relevant to any human devotee. So with that, we come to the conclusion of this Mahasatsanga. It is truly a Mahasatsanga by the greatest incarnation of Lord Datta. And I offer my salutations.
I also express my gratefulness to Dr. Nikhil for taking so much pain continuously for 2 hours, based on my foolish request, without caring for his health of the throat.
No, Swamiji, it is a great privilege, Swamiji. I am not deserving to do this work.
I will reward you sometime for this.
No, Swamiji. This itself is the reward, Swamiji. Who can get this chance to read your knowledge?
Swami,
So today,
that day 9 hours of Satsanga, this is what you spoke for 9 hours, Swami. 9 hours you didn't take water, food, nothing. You didn't even go to washroom, Swami. You spoke 9 hours continuously.
in that place, what is that? Tapas చేశారు 3 రోజులు. ఎత్తిపోతల. In that ఎత్తిపోతల. Hello?
Swami.
Yes, Swamiji.
Ettipotala temple.
Swami.
I was immersed in devotion for 3 days continuously without food, water, and sleep.
Swami.
I was sitting opposite to that statue of God Datta in that Ettipotala cave. There is a cave.
Oh,
Swami.
And then I have written that Dattaguru Bhagavad Gita.
Oh, okay.
16 chapters.
Yes.
So for 3 days, no food, no water, no sleep. So that is the tapas. That is called the tapas.
Okay,
In this section, Shri Ajay will read out the miracles performed by Shri Datta Swami along with the interpretation of each divine encounter.
Namaskar, Swami.
Namaskaram.
From from the last satsanga, this is the continuation today. Concept of contemporary human incarnation. When a soul is in a human body on this earth, the unimaginable God comes down in the same human medium to see and talk with humans for clearing all their doubts in the spiritual knowledge, to give right direction in the spiritual path. When the soul leaves this earth after death of the human body, if it takes up an energetic form to go to the upper worlds, in the upper worlds, the unimaginable God is in the energetic form called as Divine Father. God takes up the common medium of the souls for free mixing and interaction, so that the true spiritual knowledge can be preached in this world as well as in the upper worlds. This is the best convenient way for the souls. But unfortunately, there is a repulsion between common media of God and soul, as a result of which the souls reject God here as well as there, due to their ego and jealousy towards co-souls in the same medium. Thus, the soul is missing human incarnation here and energetic incarnation there. The soul loses God everywhere. Unless the soul defeats its jealousy and ego and recognize the human incarnation here, it can't recognize the Divine Father there also, due to ego and jealousy towards co-medium following the soul. The unimaginable God in several human media are Krishna, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, Mahavir, Jain, etc. And you should note the unity, unimaginable God in diversity, external human forms. Next point, behavior in world and devotion to God. Pravritti means the administration of this world, in which the soul has responsibility to follow the divine laws to keep peace and balance in the society, breaking which causes anger in God. Only very few devotees of highest level of devotion are in nivritti, which is the personal relationship with God. Pravritti, devotee is like an employee in the office of a big boss, following all the discipline of the office. Such an employee is promoted for merits, heaven, or punished for sins, hell. And hence, the pravritti devotee should be very careful every time, like the baby catching the stomach of the mother monkey. The nivritti devotee is like a family member of the boss, selected from the employees of the office only, about whom God takes care of the devotee, like the mother cat catching its baby by its mouth. If a devotee fails in the basic pravritti itself, selection for nivritti level is impossible. You cannot please God by failing in your discipline in the world, violating the commandments of God for worldly life. Pravritti and nivritti are complementary to each other and do not contradict mutually. Next point, path to salvation. Any devotee gets salvation, liberation from worldly bonds, only by the strong bond formed to God. When bond to God is strongly formed, liberation from other bonds is a natural consequence of the attachment to God, and no special effort is needed for it. You must never try for detachment from world salvation, which takes place as a natural consequence of devotion to God. True love to God is that when you sacrifice for God without aspiration for any fruit in return through miracles. Knowledge and love for devotees are like inseparable beauty and color of God, and miracles are his separable jewels. Since these jewels can be gifted to others, you find even demons performing miracles who get these from Divine Father through rigid penance. Hence, knowledge and love only are identity marks of God, and not miracles. The fruit of such highest devotion is to become human incarnation of God, or even to become master of God. When you propagate the spiritual knowledge to others, you are also revising concepts for yourself simultaneously. Only spiritual knowledge can bring total and permanent reformation of soul, after which no sin is repeated and all the past sins are smashed. Punishment is only for temporary reformation and not for vengeance. As long as you participate in the propagation, you will not be touched in the hell, since your file is kept pending by the recommendation of God not to disturb you involved in the divine service. One day or other, you will also be reformed by this propagation, and your file of all past sins also gets smashed. Next point. Real devotion to God. There are three types of devotion in the case of devotees of pravritti and nivritti. 1. Prostitute type. Devotees try to get practical benefits from God in exchange for their theoretical devotion like prayers and songs. 2. Business type. Exchange of theoretical fruit like intelligence, etc., for theoretical devotion, and exchange of practical fruit for practical sacrifice. Nivritti, number 3, Nivritti type. There is no aspiration of any fruit from God for their sacrifice. In Nivritti, the practical fruit is God. Practical fruit is got for the practical service as above, but there is no qualitative and quantitative equality in the exchange, since this is not business at all. It is only based on the requirement of devotee. A son brings his salary and gives to his mother. His mother serves him with the food and other facilities without the account, since there is no aspiration for fruit on either side. Hanuman Nivritti used himself in the service of God without any fruit in return and became God by having several temples. Arjuna Pravritti used God for his work, and hence there is no temple for Arjuna. The practical service to God is in two ways: karma sannyasa or sacrifice of work, and karma phalatyaga or sacrifice of fruit of work, money. A saint can do first type only, whereas the householder can do both. Money is matter and work is energy. Since both are interconvertible, service work and sacrifice fruit of work in any way is one and the same as per the convenience. You are doing both types for your worldly bonds and give at least equal place to God in the first stage. Next point. The dual knowledge of Hanuman of human incarnation about I, God and human being component are different, and God does everything while the human being component gets the credit being blessed devotee. And 2, the human being component itself is God, since God merged with it perfectly, because God himself wants to appear before the devotees as that human form, and this is the only alternative way for God is useful to shift to any side as the devotee shifts from faith to doubt. Hence, the dual knowledge is not the dual knowledge is not to confuse fully surrendered devotees to human incarnation by saying that the human being component is not God, but to use it whenever these surrendered devotees change their faith to doubt partially. Dual knowledge is used since both faith and doubt coexist, or totally knowledge regarding the human being component as a devotee only is used. This ends the preface of the Mahima Yamuna Swami.
Okay.
It is
In this section of the Satsanga, we will play the divine bhajans of Shri Datta Swami that have been sung melodiously by Srimati Devi.
And Padmaram, you can sing that Bhakti Ganga.
किङ्करोऽस्मि तव शङ्करनूनम् भक्तवशङ्कर पाहि पाहि शिवा किङ्करोऽस्मि तव शङ्करनूनम् हिमां सुरेखा मुक्तावळीव जाटजूटमकुटोपरिभाति उष्णीषवस्त्र शेषवदेशा धवला तरला गंगाधार किंकरोऽस्मि तव शंकर नूनं भक्तवशंकर पाहि पाहि शिव किंकरोऽस्मि तव शंकर नूनं मणिदीधिति मत्काल सर्पकुल इन्द्रनीलमणिहारचयः किं ललाटनयनं वह्निभिररुणं विभूतिरेखा कुङ्कुमबिम्बम् किंकरोऽस्मि तव शंकर नूनं भक्तवशंकर पाहि पाहि शिव किंकरोऽस्मि तव शंकर नूनं पिनाकपाणे पाशुपतास्त्रं पार्धाय दिशसि परमोदार मुनिशिशवे त्वं क्षीराब्धिमेव गौरीमेव च दशकण्ठाय किंकरोऽस्मि तव शंकर नूनं भक्तवशंकर पाहि पाहि शिव किंकरोऽस्मि तव शंकर नूनं भक्तवशंकर पाहि पाहि शिव भक्तवशंकर पाहि पाहि शिव किंकरोऽस्मि तव शंकर नूनं जय गुरुदत्त नमस्कार स्वामी
नमस्ते रमा सुंदरी
स्वामी नमस्कार स्वामी गुरुदेव दत्त
श्री वेणुगोपाल कृष्णाय वंदनम
ओके स्वामी श्री वेणुगोपाल कृष्णाय वंदनम श्री वेणुगोपाल कृष्णाय वंदनम श्री वेणुगोपाल कृष्णाय वंदनम श्री वेणुगोपाल कृष्णाय वंदनम ऋषिवराणां मानसालोलहंसाय मकुटान्तमयूरपिञ्चावतंसाय एकप्रहारेण विध्वस्तकंसाय श्री वेणुगोपाल कृष्णाय वंदनम श्री वेणुगोपाल कृष्णाय वंदनम व्यत्यस्त विन्यस्त पादारविन्दाय मधुरामृतासार मुरली निनादाय जाज्वल्यमानांशु पीताम्बरांगाय श्री वेणुगोपाल कृष्णाय वंदनम श्री वेणुगोपाल कृष्णाय वंदनम आकर्ण तेजस्वी मीनायताक्षाय प्रत्यूष पद्मांशु नेत्रच्छदयुगाय कमललोचन कांति सम्मोहनास्त्राय श्री वेणुगोपाल कृष्णाय वन्दनम् श्री वेणुगोपाल कृष्णाय वन्दनम् आमुक्तमुक्तावलीजालहाराय गोपीदधीक्षीरनवनीतचोराय बृन्दावने वल्लवी बृन्दजाराय श्रीवेणुगोपाल कृष्णाय वन्दनम् श्रीवेणुगोपाल कृष्णाय वन्दनम् सायन्तने धेनु बृन्दानुगमनाय मार्गमध्ये वल्लवी कुञ्चिताक्षाय राधा जगन्मोहिनी मोहनाय श्री वेणुगोपाल कृष्णाय वन्दनम् श्री वेणुगोपाल कृष्णाय वन्दनम् कालीय फणिफणा संक्षोभनटनाय काञ्चीक्वणत्पिङ्किणी निस्वनाय गोवर्धनोद्धरणलीलास्मितास्याय श्री वेणुगोपाल कृष्णाय वन्दनम् श्री वेणुगोपाल कृष्णाय वन्दनम् कस्तूरिका तिलकरेखाललाटाय तुलसी स्रगामोदवक्ष कवाटाय पार्थाय विश्वरूपालोलकेटाय श्री वेणुगोपाल कृष्णाय वन्दनम् श्री वेणुगोपाल कृष्णाय वन्दनम् श्री रुक्मिणी सत्यभामा समेताय गोपी सहस्रेण संवेष्टितांगाय रासे रसे सर्वदा सत्विनोदाय श्री वेणुगोपाल कृष्णाय वन्दनम् श्री वेणुगोपाल कृष्णाय वन्दनम् श्री वेणुगोपाल कृष्णाय वन्दनम् స్వామి మీ పాదపద్మాలకు నమస్కారం స్వామి గురుదేవ దత్త
డాక్టర్ నిఖిల్
Yes, Swamiji.
కెన్ యూ ప్లే ఉద్వేగరహిత ఉద్వేగరహిత సంతోషరహిత
Yes, Swamiji.
उद्वेगरहित संतोषरहित शांति समुद्र श्री दत्त शांति समुद्र श्री दत्त शांति समुद्र श्री दत्त निश्चल निर्मल तत्वज्ञानी निश्चल निर्मल तत्वज्ञानी निर्विकार जगदन्त साक्षी निर्विकार जगदन्त साक्षी उद्वेग रहित संतोष रहित शांति समुद्र श्री दत्त शांति समुद्र श्री दत्त शांति समुद्र श्री दत्त योगिराज गुरु पीठाधीश योगिराज गुरु पीठाधीश अवधूताखिल विषयस्पन्दा अवधूताखिल विषयस्पन्दा उद्वेगरहित सन्तोषरहित शान्ति समुद्र श्रीदत्ता शान्ति समुद्र श्रीदत्ता शान्ति समुद्र श्रीदत्ता।
परब्रह्म समारंभाम
परब्रह्म समारंभां श्री दत्तात्रेय मध्यमां श्री दत्त स्वामी पर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरु परम्पराम्।
सर्वविस्मञ्जस्तपादपद्मायते वामहस्तालोल वेदशास्त्रायते ज्ञानसूर्यायते दत्तरूपायते श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम् श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम् श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम्।